Hey everyone, I apologize for the delay on these videos. I just have a lot of irons in the fire this past month, but I want to do a video about this information about the Lewiston shooting, and then we're going to go back and take a look at the little bit of information about the Georgia Guidestones, and then the wormwood connections to the start of the Israel war. I had covered a few of these slides earlier, but I never got into the some of the number details, so we'll do that today. And want to cover some Eclipse stuff as well. And I guess I'll just start with an interesting thing that I didn't know until just a month or so ago about the term corona. And I had looked at this eclipse before, and this goes along with my Revelation earthquake in Chicago theme that I've been following. All the stuff connected to Chicago and the Great Earthquake from Revelation 6:12, and I talked a little bit about Hudson Bay as well, but which is directly above the Great Lakes in Chicago. But this Revelation earthquake theme that seems to be ongoing with the city of Chicago is interesting because there has only been one eclipse where the totality was visible over the city of Chicago, and that was back in 1806 on June 16th. And this is where Jose Joaquin de Ferrer coined the name corona for the visible bright outer edge of the sun during an eclipse. And of course, if we look at the eclipses here, there's our corona around the eclipse, and this is the Wikipedia page for the list of solar eclipses in the 21st century, and their featured eclipse just happens to be the July 22nd, 2009 eclipse, and this eclipse totality just happened to pass over Wuhan, China, and of course the corona is definitely connected to that. So we have this kind of this Chicago and corona connection with an eclipse. And I'm going to cover a little bit of, I'll show you some kind of predictive programming from a few movies, and there's probably an absolute ton of this stuff, but I'll show you 3 examples of what I will call an unexpected eclipse from a few movies, and for predictive programming. And I think that's going to apply to Chicago, since we have this kind of corona connection to Chicago and the earthquake connection to Chicago. So let's go back here and take a look at this Lewiston shooting. We'll start with that. Now, the Lewiston shooting was in Maine, and it was back on the October 25th. And it actually finished most of these slides like on the 26th or 27th, and I was going to do a video on it right away. I just haven't found the time. But that shooting supposedly happened or began at a bowling alley. And the first thing I thought of when a bowling alley, we have a bowling ball, which is a black ball hitting the pins down on a long path, a long wooden path. And it kind of reminded me of the eclipse path because we have this eclipse coming up in April 8th of 2024 that will complete the X over Texas, and it will complete the X over Carbondale, Illinois with that 2017 eclipse. But it passed over. The last U.S. state it's going to pass over in 2024 is going to be Maine. Now, Lewiston isn't directly over the eclipse path, but being that it's the last state that it passes over, I'm sure there's definitely a connection there. And I showed you some other connections with some interesting stuff with the birth certificate and Maine and some legal definitions. And I think all this stuff is kind of connected. Well, I know it is, but yeah, we'll just take a quick look at this Lewiston shooting because it had some wormwood connections and a bunch of numbers that I've just been showing for a long time to kind of just bring it all together. Okay, so here's the Lewiston shooting, October 25th, 2023, and it started at the Just-in-Time Recreation Center, which was a bowling alley, right? And we have our bowling ball, I think, symbolism for the eclipse. And I'm not going to go into this too much here, other than the date and the beginning of the location, of course. But the date is super interesting because 1025, that's on a list of numbers that are connected to the 3313. Now the 3313, of course, is our 24th star number, and that's where our beginning in Revelation, the beginning of the 33 verses to 8:11, the falling wormwood star, which my channel is all about, and then the 13 more verses to Revelation 9:11. And 1025 is 5 times 5 times 41, which is the 3rd, 3rd, and 13th primes. So there's our 3313 connection to wormwood, and Revelation 6:12 and Revelation 9:11, because it falls right in the middle there, and there's our star number. Okay, so we have this Lewiston shooting, Lewiston, and these two articles came out right after that shooting, that there was a shelter-in-place order, and that Maine families were reading Bibles, right? I mean, this is kind of just a weird news story to put out that you're reading a Bible. You know, I mean, they're definitely kind of trying to make that connection that it's a biblical ritual or a biblical connection to this shooting, right? Because it's also, I think, connected to Chicago. There was another article, I think the same day or right around that, the day after, that L.L. Bean temporarily closed some Maine stores as a response to this Lewiston shooting. And I had just showed you guys in my last few videos, you know, we have the, oh, this isn't working right here. Here we go. We have the Cloud Gate in Chicago that looks like a drop of mercury. And it's also, the alternate name for this is called the Bean. So, I think it's interesting that we have this L.L. Bean connection to Maine, connected to the shooting, and people reading their Bibles with a shelter-in-place order, right? And here are the numbers that make it connected to the Bible. I would say very, and this coming eclipse in 2024. So if we go to 1025, or excuse me, we start at 10/25/2023, the day of the shooting, to the X eclipse on 4/8/2024, it's 166 days. And I've covered that number many times because the 166th prime is 983. And I just literally showed you guys in this video here that the word Jesus appears 983 times in the King James Bible. So that 983 keeps popping up, and we're going to do some more on the 983 in the future. It's just a super important number to these biblical rituals. But so 166 days to the eclipse, 166th prime is 983, and that's how many times we see Jesus appears in the Bible. And this is kind of an interesting Wikipedia page, the Crucifixion Darkness. And supposedly there was a, kind of an unexpected solar eclipse when Jesus was crucified, and that was also accompanied by an earthquake. So we have this crucifixion darkness. I guess I would call it an unexpected eclipse. And the reason I say that is there's a lot of predictive programming for an unexpected eclipse, especially when we kind of look at the Chicago connection to this corona. They're pointing to Chicago, or something is pointing to Chicago. Let's look at the unexpected eclipses here. This is what I'll call the unexpected eclipses predicted programming, right? So this is from Independence Day, and this is when the first time that, you know, the alien ship shows up, right? Kind of have this looming darkening of the sun, right? When the ship shows up. Right over the Twin Towers there. Okay, and then here's another one that was Independence Day. Now here's another one from Little Shop of Horrors. Someone else, a subscriber or commenter, had pointed this out to me, so I can't remember exactly who it was, but thanks for pointing this out to me. This unexpected eclipse in Little Shop of Horrors. This video is kind of bad quality, but yeah, this whole movie starts with an unexpected eclipse, and then the killer flower, the killer plant, comes to life here. So then another one, of course, was the Lego movie. Right at the beginning, we have the cube. Right, and the unexpected eclipse, everything darkens again. But there's probably a ton of this eclipse symbolism that you could find in all kinds of movies. So, but yeah, I've been looking at all kinds of predictive programming for Chicago and eclipse stuff, and I might just dedicate a few videos to that because it's pretty interesting. Right, Taco Tuesday, right? They had the Mexicans, right? You know, because the coming eclipse, right, it's going to pass. The totality is in Mexico, right? So there's definitely a connection there with the Lego movie, with the Taco Tuesday, but it's actually on a Friday. So, and then I'm going to go back and finish this with the Hamas. I think this is also connected because it's certainly a wormwood ritual for the beginning of the Hamas-Israel war. And I showed you this before, but Israel, the partition plan between Israel and Palestine was November 29th, 1947, and the vote was 33-13, right? Another wormwood revelation connection there. So we had the official declaration of war on Hamas on 10/8 after the attack on 10/7, and 10/8 just happened to be 27,707 days after this partition between Palestine and Israel. And without the zero there, we have the 2777, and that's the 404th prime number. Right, our 404 verses are represented in Revelation by this number. So an interesting day for the war here, connected to the Palestine partition plan for Israel, directly connected to Revelation. And this is another number I've shown connected to Revelation. The 273rd verse of Revelation has to do with Armageddon, which is Revelation 16:16. It's the 273rd verse of Revelation, and that's also connected to Israel. This is one Bobby Simpson had pointed out to me, but the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 273 adopted Israel into the United Nations. So there's another 273 connection. That was back in May 11th, 1949. And there's a moon connection as well, because the war started exactly 273 lunar months after 9/11. Take our 8,062 days divided by the lunar month, 29.53, and you get 273 lunar months. The Israel-Hamas war started after 9/11, or 273 Armageddon connection. And then also, if we go back to 2015 and look at this blood moon tetrad that a ton of people were talking about back in 2015, from September 27th, which was the beginning of that tetrad to the beginning of the war was 8 years, 11 days, right? That's our connection to Wormwood, right? Our Revelation 8:11. Falling Wormwood star, it all connects. And then I showed you the Nashville bombing to the beginning of the war was 33 months, 13 days, right? This was at the address of 166 for our 166 prime, which is 983. Let's see here. Another thing I wanted to cover real quick was another lunar month connection, a lunar count connection with the Georgia Guidestones, because as I've shown you before, the Georgia Guidestones, if we go from the Guidestones to McCormick Place in Chicago, I have a lot of connections to McCormick Place because the symbol on the McCormick Place Convention Center is identical to the star that's on top of the San Jacinto Monument. And the San Jacinto Monument, in turn, the reflecting pool points to the Trinity test. So this McCormick Place seems to be a very highly coded place in Chicago, but it's 585 miles from the Georgia Guidestones to McCormick Place. And then back in 2022 on July 6th, we had the Georgia Guidestones were destroyed, and they just happened to be destroyed on an exact lunar count as well. They were completed in March 22nd, 1980. Definitely a skull and bones connection there, but exactly 523 lunar months later, from the completion to their destruction on 7/6, 523 lunar months. And actually, if you look at the video that we were shown, it's actually during the 4-hour and 4th minute of the day, right? 4:03 a.m., which is in the 4-hour and 4th minute, like our verses in Revelation. And they even show a silver car with a sunroof, right? Like the moon and the sun, right? That would be an eclipse. You know, this quick clip of this car driving away. That's a symbolism I get out of it, but I think that's pretty interesting. But 523 lunar months from completion to destruction. There's our 585 miles to Chicago. And then if we look at the Georgia Guidestones, they actually look like an X. And of course, X is the 24th letter. There's a bunch of X connections that we've seen lately. Especially, you know, the main symbolism is from the eclipses. The 2017 and 2024 eclipse that will make an X over Carbondale, Illinois, and then the X will also be formed over Uvalde, Texas, by that same eclipse where we had the Uvalde shooting. But if we look at 523, like 523 lunar months, and we have the X, which is a 24, we'll look at that date real quick. It's pretty interesting. So if we go from the destruction of the Guidestones on 7/6/2022 to 5/23/2024, you can see it's 687 days. And that's a pretty interesting number, because that's exactly how many days there is in a Martian year. So if we look at the Martian or Darien calendar, May 23rd, 2024, here it is. It's actually, I believe this is, yeah, it's Virgo 1. It's the first day of Virgo on their calendar, but we'll go back exactly 1 year. And you can see July 6, 2022. So exactly 1 Martian year after the destruction of the Guidestones is going to be 5/23/2024. So that's an interesting date to kind of look for. 5/23/2024. What else do we have here? I'm going to start doing some other videos with some predictive programming, and I want to look at the owl symbolism, right? I think I talked about this before, but owl, right? If we look at the star trails created in the sky near the equator, they actually make 2, concentric circles, whatever, in the sky, and that kind of looks like an owl. And then I said the owl if you look at it as an acronym, it would be other world life forms, right? And let me take a look at this here. It's kind of funny too if you go back to the Nashville bombing. I'll have to show you guys that later when I do the owl stuff, but they actually talk about aliens, right? Supposedly the guy was talking about aliens or whatever that did the Nashville bombing, and there was some other connections there, but we'll get into that more later when I start finding all these owl connections. There's already a lot I've found, but just kind of interesting to look at that, considering there's an alien theme with the Nashville bombing, and then there's, all this stuff we've had in the past few years about the government and their release of, UFOs or UAPs, whatever they call them. Okay, guys, that's it. Thanks for watching.